Flipping houses does not have to be overcomplicated, and that is why I have broken it down into a simple 10-step process, how you can actually get started from a complete beginner and go from a complete beginner to doing what we've done and flipping over 6 houses in the last 18 months, generating over $700,000 in revenue from those flip projects. And yes, this is Australia. I'm here to break it down. Let's get into it. The first step that you want to do is you want to pick an area to target. So you want to pick an area to target. So what sort of thing are we looking for? Okay, there's different types of markets. There's 3 types of markets. So there's a buyer's market, a neutral market, and a seller's market. Okay, a buyer's market is basically when you're in an area where there's lots of houses on the market, there's heaps of supply, and there's a very limited amount of people that actually want to buy houses in those areas. So it means houses are going on the market, not many buyers, they're sitting on the market for longer, and they're not selling very quickly. That's the type of market you want to avoid flipping in, okay? A neutral market is where supply and demand is basically at a pretty normal stage of the cycle. Houses are still selling, they're not necessarily selling super quickly, but they're not selling really slowly. So you might find that the houses in a lot of the suburbs are still sitting between 30 and 60 days as a median time on market before your house actually sells. A neutral market is great to flip in. The thing you got to consider with this is when you buy the house, you do not want to be buying a house to flip and make money and do your end numbers on, let's say it's going to sell for 600. Let's say that market is actually going backwards. You might go to actually sell it after you've done the renovation, like 2 or 3 months later down the line, and that house might have actually declined in value because there's more stock on the market, there's more houses to choose from, basically meaning that it's going to eat up your profits, and you don't want to do that. So that's why you've got to be very selective on the market that you choose. The best market to flip in is a seller's market. It just means the person selling the house has all the control. There's usually a lot more buyers, and it just means the houses are selling a lot quicker. The great thing about a seller's market is you can actually get extra profits on top of what you're originally anticipating. So let's say the same example, you buy a house and you're expecting it's going to sell for 600. If you're in a seller's market and you got multiple people bidding on the property, it just means you could potentially get an extra 20 or 30K or even more than that on top of your profit. So let's say you estimate you're going to make 50K on the flip. You might end up with 60, 70, 80 or $100,000 on that project because there's multiple buyers, there's lots of demand, the house is selling really quickly, and that, in my opinion, is the best market to flip houses in. All right, what is the second thing that we want to be looking at? Okay, we want to find a deal, okay? So once we've chosen our market, once we've picked the market that we're going to flip in, okay, we need to find a deal. How do we actually find these deals, okay? I'm not going to go into the depth of every single thing that you can do to do this in this particular video. I'll make another video going directly into this. But to find a deal, there's many different ways you can do it. There's direct to seller marketing, so doing letter campaigns. You can put bandit signs up, basically advertising that you're looking to buy these houses. You can put flyers out there. You can do all sorts of advertising. You can literally put advertising on the back of the bus if you want. You just have to be creative with this strategy. Any way that you can basically get direct with the homeowner and cut out the middleman, being the real estate agent, is a great way that you can potentially create a win-win scenario for you and the person selling the property. And that's how you can potentially get the property at a discount. Some other ways to find deals, okay? You can literally, the free way to do it is literally going to realestate.com, okay? Use ChatGPT, leverage AI and put in keywords and try them on the realestate.com. Type in the suburbs and the areas that you've chosen, like after you've actually chosen a market in the suburbs you're going to flip in, and then go through that, okay? Start looking for rundown properties that like express sale, just examples like that, okay? Real estate and domain are obviously going to have a lot of opportunities, like even Facebook Marketplace. Like you can literally buy and sell houses through that now. There's for sale by owner, there's Gumtree, there's so many different ways you can actually find these deals. There's buyer's agents, you can network with real estate agents to get deals either on market, pre-market, or off market. There's so many different ways to find deals, and there are some absolutely cracking deals out there once you actually get into this and you start looking for a property. All right, what's the third thing that we want to do? Okay, number 3. Once we have found the deal, we need to inspect the property, okay? Once we have actually found a property. So you've gone through step 1 and 2, okay? You've picked your market, you found a deal, okay, or what you think may be a deal, okay? The next thing to do is inspect the property, okay? The reason we want to inspect it, especially if you're starting out, is because we want to go through and take note of all the things that need to be fixed up on the property, so that when we go home later on, we can do a breakdown of all the costs, we can run the numbers, which is a step that's coming up, and we can go through that whole process, okay? Some key things to look out for when you're inspecting the property, okay? You want to make sure you're doing a full walkthrough of the inside and the outside of the property. How many bedrooms does it have? How many bathrooms? Has there been any illegal add-ons? Like, have they got a lean-to off the side of the house and then they've enclosed it, but it's not really a legal add-on? These are things you're going to have to be considering, which we'll go through more of that in the due diligence step that's coming up as well. But you want to be looking for these things. So you want to be looking at the ceilings. Like, are there any ceilings that are sagging that look like they're nearly about to fall down? Obviously, those things can get fixed, but they all come at a cost. The whole idea of inspecting the property is to go through it so that you're actually accounting for everything and making sure that you're not going to miss anything when you go to do your numbers, because the last thing you want to do is buy this property, not have done your proper checks and due diligence, and then walk away at the other end thinking you're going to make all this profit, but you haven't allowed for all the things that you need to allow for, okay? Does the property need to be repainted? Does it need new lighting? Is the switchboard upgraded? Does it have any cracks in the brickwork? Is it on stumps? Is it going to need to be re-stumped? Does it have structural damages? Okay, there's all these things that you want to be considering when you're going through the property and making sure you're taking note of them. Just another tip, I also do a video walkthrough of the property and take photos of the property, just so when I get home, like, you're not going to remember every little detail about the property, okay? When you get home, you can go back, reference the video, and make sure that you're accounting for everything later on when you're not on site actually going through the process. All right, the 4th step in all of this is what I touched on before, due diligence. Okay, this debatable could actually be before that other step, but look, if a property is on a main road, for example, you're obviously going to see that before you even go to the property. So it's up to your discretion if you actually want to go and view the property. Due diligence is particularly important because you don't want to be doing your numbers on a property that is on a main road and comparing it to another property that's potentially on a nice quiet street, and then you go to actually sell it later on. You go through the process, you buy the property, you completely miss that main road part of the due diligence, and then walk away and get 50 or 100K less than what you anticipated, and basically walk away breaking even or making no money. You don't want to do that, okay? That's why due diligence is so important, okay? You want to be looking for any major things that are going to get in the way of you being able to sell this property at the end, okay? If the property has a terrible floor plan, you've either got to account for the costs of what it's going to cost to actually rejig the floor plan and make it look a lot more functional so that someone's going to want to actually buy it at the other end. If the property is on stumps, as I mentioned before, like, how much is it going to cost to re-stump? I genuinely try and avoid these types of houses that have major structural defects, purely because I'm trying to flip these houses in a 4 to 6 week window, And as soon as you got to re-stump it, it throws just about everything else out in the house. It'll crack walls, the windows will be on the piss, and it could even like damage the structural integrity of the roof by jacking it up and going through this process. So not to mention if it's a weatherboard house, the weatherboards on the outside could be sloping, and look, it's just opening up a can of worms in my opinion. Yes, you can buy those types of properties at a massive discount, but it's going to push out your whole reno process a lot further. So that's just one example of due diligence and why it's so important. The thing you got to have in the back of your mind, and the thing that I am always paranoid about when I'm looking to buy a property is there anything major? Is there any major red flags that are going to get in the way of me being able to sell this property at the other end? Is there anything that's going to affect that? Like, is it in a flood zone? Is it, as I said, is it in an area with high voltage power lines? Any of these type of things. You want to be making sure you're accounting for absolutely everything. Because the last thing I want you to do is to go into a property thinking it's a great deal and then have trouble selling it at the other end. It could cause a lot of headaches for you, and that's why that step is very, very important. Okay, so we've run our due diligence. We've gone through any red flags and there's no major hurdles, okay? What do we do next? We want to run the numbers, okay? Run the numbers. The reason we want to do this is the last thing you want to do is go to realestate.com, search up rundown house, find one in your area, and then just think just because it's old and it's run down that you're going to make money on it, okay? That is the quickest way to lose money. You don't want to be relying on just doing numbers quickly in your head, okay? You want to actually have a detailed VSO and a detailed breakdown of all the cost accounted for before you make your offer, okay? I work out what I can sell the property for at the end, okay? Once it's renovated, once it's repaired, once it's fixed up, I work all my numbers back from that. So the first thing I do is work out what I can sell it for at the other end once it's renovated, and then I work out everything else. So I deduct the renovation costs, I deduct stamp duty, I deduct holding costs, investor cost or bank interest costs, staging costs, selling the real estate agent, all of this sort of stuff. You want to be making sure you're accounting for absolutely everything. And if you want a little tip on how you can actually do that, go to my Instagram page, which I'll link below. I literally have made videos with a full breakdown from start to finish on what I paid for the property, all the costs factored into my feasibility, and then the profit I made after all of that. You can literally copy all that stuff and make your own template on Google Sheets. That's my little tip for you today. Once we've gone through this process, okay, once we have picked an area to target, we have found a deal, we have gone through and inspected the property, we've run through and we've done our due diligence, we've done the numbers, then we can actually go in and make an offer, okay? So number 6, make an offer. Hopefully you can actually read that. Make an offer, okay? What does this involve? So I obviously can't give you any detailed financial advice or anything on here. I'm just going to speak from my experience and generally what I do, okay? You want to make sure your offer still protects you. So if you're getting finance to help fund the deal, you don't want to go in and make a cash offer, okay? To keep it very simple, you want to make sure you are going subject to finance. So I always put a subject to finance clause into my offers, basically to protect me in that way in case the finance doesn't come through for whatever reason, okay? That's your protection. Another thing that I always get, and I would recommend that you get as well, is a building and pest inspection. Now, depending on where you are, state to state, I know in Perth, a lot of houses get sold as is, which basically completely disregards that. So you virtually have to buy the property as it is. So you can't get a building and pest inspection like as a clause on the contract, which, look, it's a bit rough that they do that. So Those particular properties you have to be careful on. You just have to know that if you're going to buy it, you have to allow for potential unforeseen structural issues on the property once you actually get stuck into the reno, okay? That's definitely something important to know. Once you've done this, okay, making sure your offer is subject to a building pest, subject to finance. As I mentioned before, this is not financial advice. Definitely speak to a good property conveyancer or a settlement agent about this. They'll be able to give you the right guidance. But once you've done that, that's what I personally do, okay? You want to make sure your offer is actually set up in a way that it's going to work for the seller and it's also going to work for you, okay? A lot of people don't do this. A lot of people, when they're buying a property, they're only thinking about number one, themselves, okay? When I'm buying a property, especially if I'm looking to flip it and make some money, you got to work in with the seller, okay? Do they want a 60-day settlement? Do they need a 90-day settlement? Do they want a 30-day settlement? Are they trying to sell it as quickly as possible? What is their situation? Is their house full of junk and they're stressed out about having to get rid of it all and they just want to sell the house with all the stuff in it? That is very important to actually find out through the real estate agent, or if you're dealing with them directly directly off market, you want to ask these questions, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, house flipping is, you're in the business of problem solving, okay? You can make great money in this game if you can solve a big enough problem for someone. And if they're motivated and if their house is a burden to them and they just want to get rid of it and you can provide a solution, a lot of people will take that on and they'll sell their house at a discount, and it can provide a win-win situation for both of you, okay? So you want to be asking those questions. The last tip I've got with this, making an offer, is you don't want to get emotional when you go to buy, okay? If you're purely buying this house to flip it and make money, you have to have a maximum number, okay? Don't try and tweak your reno costs and tweak all these other costs to try and make the numbers work, okay? If there's too thin of a margin in the deal, that's where you can come unstuck. You want to be conservative on your numbers, on your end sale price, and you want to have a maximum offer that you go in with. You don't want to overpay for this property. Please keep that in mind, okay? A lot of people try to get into this game and they end up overpaying and they go through the whole process and they get to the end and they make 10 grand, 20 grand. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be going through this whole process to make 10 or 20 grand, okay? You want to be making good money if you're going to be stepping into this game. All right, so once you've made an offer, your offer is accepted, okay? Congratulations, you now have your first deal put together. The next thing you got to do is organize your finance, okay? Organize finance. Now, I will make a point with this. If you are looking to buy it and go through a major bank, which I don't really recommend doing it this way, but if you're starting out and you want to take advantage of the first home buyer grant or first home buyer scheme and just buy a house, live in it, fix it up, that's virtually what we did. We bought our first house, lived in it, done all the renos ourselves, and then basically, like, we didn't really plan to move out of it, but our circumstances changed. We added value and then we sold it, and being in our personal name, we were fortunate that we didn't have to pay any capital gains tax on the profit, okay? So if you're going through a major bank, before you actually get to this point, you really want to have your finance, at least your pre-approval done, okay? If a real estate agent, it's mainly on market deals. If you're directly with the seller, they're probably not really going to care, to be honest, about a pre-approval. But if you are trying to buy a house on market to fix up and renovate and repair, you want to have a pre-approval sorted, a few steps back probably. But purely for this example of buying a house to flip, and that's all your intention is to get in and out in 2, 3, 4, 5 months, this is the next step, okay? Finance. So how do you actually fund these deals? There's many different ways you can do it. So look, if you're planning to buy the property, and I've gone over this stuff in other videos, okay? So if you want to go into more depth about the finance and how I've actually been funding my deals, I made a really good video about that recently. But just to give you a quick overview. So there's private lenders, which can be great. They will lend up to 65 to 70% of the purchase price of the property, and then you've got to come up with the rest, okay? So you've got to come up with the 30%, and then the reno costs, stamps, and a couple other costs there. So the great thing about private lenders, and I have leveraged private lenders myself, is they don't care about financials. So when I quit my job at the end of last year, I didn't have any serviceability through a job to be able to get financing through a normal bank, okay? That's where the difference is with finance, okay? Normal banks will want, you need to have serviceability, whereas private lenders, they just care about the deal. As long as you can buy the property at a low enough price, they'll fund the deal, okay? Another way to do this and fund the deals is investor capital, or money partners, a lot of people call them, okay? Anyone can literally be a money partner. You don't have to be have some specific investor ticket or anything like that. If you have money in your bank account, or if you have money in a self-managed super fund, or any of this, you can lend money, okay? I provide my money partners with a high interest rate and basically 3 layers of security, which basically protects them and their money, okay? The great thing about this is you're in and out of the deal really quickly. They like these deals because of that. They get in and out of the deal, they get their money back plus their interest reasonably quickly. Like, instead of funding a developer's project and not getting their money back for 12 months, 18 months, even 2-3 years, they're getting their money back really quickly, and it can be a great way to create a win-win for both you and them. Like, if you've got a good deal and you need the extra money, you just got to pitch to like, you can even pitch to family, friends, anyone like that. There's so many people out there that actually have money, and when you open up your eyes to it, there's a lot of people that want to get a really good high interest return on their investment. And if you're providing 3 layers of security, look, in my eyes, your money is really, really safe, okay? Obviously, this isn't financial advice, okay? Go and speak to a good property solicitor about all this stuff that I'm talking about. They're going to point you in the right direction and help you with the contracts and agreements and things like that you can utilize to your advantage to actually, work with an investor and make this process all above board. All right, step number 8. You've gone through this process, you've got your finance in check, you've got the deal, happy days, okay? Now you've got to actually book in your trades, okay? So number 8, book in trades, okay? So booking in trades. So there's going to be a number of people and professionals that you need with you to help you do this deal and do this process. So if you're planning on outsourcing all the works, obviously you got to get all the trades in to do it. If you're planning to do a bit of the work yourself, obviously it's probably going to take you longer. I've done it before myself, and it's a great way to save money. But if you're trying to do this as a business, I would be outsourcing majority of the works, just so you can take on multiple projects at a time, okay? First person that I get on site is, like, I'll get a skip bin booked on site for the day the house is going to settle. I'll get my sparky and my plumber to go and disconnect anything that's in the way. We'll go through, demolish anything, rip out anything, get rid of any rubbish that we need to, and clear out the inside and even the outside of the house. And then it's just a matter of putting the house back together. So pretty much all the flip projects I have done, we've gutted the bathrooms, the kitchens, purely because they were just too far gone, and it was going to be worth the investment to rip it all out, reconfigure the layout, and put in completely new stuff. So the inside, like, you got to think about these guys. You got painters, you got potentially a renderer, someone to render the house. You've got your floor installers. A handyman is obviously going to be important in all of this. They can do all the little odd jobs. A plasterer, as I mentioned before, sparky, plumber. Yeah, I'm not going to go into all the depth. I'll make another video completely on this and what trades you actually need, but that's going to be the next step. Once you've got your trades booked in, you've been waiting patiently, and the house is now settled, okay? It's officially in your name or your company's name, however you got it set up, and you're ready to rip into it, okay? It's time to actually fix this property up. So, number 9, renovate the property. So, in terms of actually renovating the property, I basically just went through some of that stuff before. So, I get a skip in on site at the start, okay? We go through, get the plumber and sparky to disconnect, get everything demolished. Well, if the house has got tiles and you want to replace the flooring with hybrid or laminate, for example, I'll get them to remove all the old tiles, get it ready for the floor installer. We'll rip out the kitchen if it needs to. We'll rip out the bathroom if we need to. We'll go through that whole process. And then it's just a matter of putting it all back together, okay? It's actually, like, once you've done it once, it's actually a very, very simple process. It sounds like it's complicated, but it's actually a really, really simple process. And as I mentioned, I'll go into more depth and detail in another video to show you my exact process on how I renovated a property, put it back together and put it on the market in anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. And then once the renovation's done, you're basically done. Other than getting someone in to mow the lawns and tidy the house up, the process is basically finished, and you're just waiting for the real estate agent to sell the property, or if you're selling it yourself, you're selling the property, and then a month or so later, you're getting paid, okay? The longest any of my projects have actually taken since we've started, the longest sale time was from start to finish, just over 3 months, okay? All of them have been less than 100 days from the moment I bought the property, settled on it, done the renovation, and then someone's put an offer in, bought the house, and then the house is settled at the other end and we've got paid. Less than 100 days, okay? So you can actually get paid reasonably quick if you know what you're doing and you know how to structure everything from start to finish. Okay, so we've gone through this whole process. I hope you guys can actually see here, it's a very simple process. And that was the whole idea of me putting this 10-step framework and roadmap for a complete beginner on how they can go from where they are now to doing their first deal and then just rinsing, repeating this model. It's very simple once you break it down into these small little steps. And I suppose just to finish off, number 10 is the best part about this whole thing, okay? Sell and collect your cash. Okay, just to finish it off. So once you've gone through all those steps 1 to 9, you've got to get it on the market. You want to be making sure you're using a good real estate agent that is an expert in that area, that is ideally achieving the best prices, the best sale prices in those areas, because that way you're going to maximize your profit, okay? One other tip here when you're selling, I have staged every house that I have sold. And one thing to note, people buy with emotion and they justify with logic, okay? People walk into a house and if it's staged beautifully and they can envision how it's going to look and how they're going to set it up once they move in, they're going to pay more. They're going to get emotionally involved, and then even if they overpay, they'll later justify their decision with logic, okay? It's not the other way around. So something that is, look, every dollar you put in, you want to be looking to get $2 or $3 in return. And every investment that you put into these flip projects when you're renovating them, you want to be thinking that way, okay? And that's why I think staging is very, very critical and very important, because when a person's looking online and they can see a house is beautifully staged, and like there's a reason why all the display homes for all the big builders, they're all beautifully staged with all this nice furniture and all these top end finishes. They're selling you the dream, okay? That's something that's very important. So if you can get the house looking exactly the way that someone envisions themselves living in it, they're going to pay a premium. You're going to get a bigger amount of cash at the end of it because they're going to pay more. If you get two people that bid against each other, it's going to drive the prices up even more, which is obviously great. And that's basically it. You collect your cash and then you rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat that model, reinvest into the next one, keep reinvesting your profits until you have a nest egg big enough that you can actually start holding some of these properties and building some long-term wealth, which is exactly my plan. In the future, we're just building up our nest egg right now and building up our capital. And then we're actually going to start using this same model, buy an old house, fix it up, renovate it, and then rent it out. And that's going to be a great way for us to actually build long-term wealth and keep our mortgage low on the property because we're buying it cheap, buying it at a discount. And that's really why I love this strategy of flipping houses, because you can make cash in the short term and then it can lead you into the next thing that's going to help you generate long-term wealth. If you've got value from this video, please like this video, put a comment on this video. If you got any questions, if you got any things you want to ask, I'm obviously here to help. I'm here to provide you with as much guidance as I can based on my own experience and what we have achieved so far. And yeah, if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button and we'll see you on the next one.